All right, we're good to go. Okay, here we go. Sorry, it's not the full screen. I really don't want to close out again. So I'm just going to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. We're going to talk through a couple of the tests, and we will have some really cool prizes at the end. So here we go. All right, so most of you know my story, so I'm going to keep it pretty short, and I really want to get to the main event that really launched my career, my dive into learning about the body, because it really motivated me to uncover, like, what are the actual underlying reasons for disease? Why do things actually happen in your body? What's going on? So I was sitting in a doctor's office in 2015. It was actually, if you see that picture down in the bottom right, October of 2015, it was 2 months before that in August. And I was sitting in a doctor's office just completely devastated. She's talking in the background. My husband is sitting next to me. He took a day off of work to babysit me because I was so emotionally unstable at the time. I couldn't be alone. My mom had come to the house and stayed with me several days that week. And I just remember feeling totally scared out of my mind because I didn't know what was happening to my body. I was completely embarrassed because of the burden I was placing on my family. I was upset at the doctor for not being able to help me figure out what was going on. This was my second visit to her. And she just told me that all she could recommend to me was an antidepressant. And because I had used antidepressants once before in my late teens, I would probably need to be on them for a minimum of a year. But I knew, I was really upset. I knew that I wasn't depressed. That wasn't the problem. That's not what was happening. But she didn't have any other options to give me. I did happen to ask at the time, hey, should I get my hormones tested? And her reply to me was, as long as you're still getting your period regularly, I don't think that's necessary. So we left the doctor's office with nothing. We sat down at lunch together and I cried. I reached over and I was holding my husband's hand and I didn't know what to do. So I had spent 2 weeks basically with total insomnia, bawling my eyes out, chronic panic attacks, and all she could offer me was an antidepressant. So shortly after that visit, I went ahead and I was like, you know what? She's not going to help me. I'm going to help myself. And I pursued hormone testing and discovered that I had postmenopausal level hormones. And so for some reason, my body simply wasn't producing enough estrogen or progesterone. And boom, you have panic attacks, you can't sleep, you have anxiety, all of those things that I was experiencing correlated with such extreme low hormones. So at the time, I was already into healthy eating. You can see between those pictures there, there's a big change between my, late teens, early 20s, and my mid 20s there. We had already discovered eating gluten-free. I was already on my way into paleo and eating whole real foods. But I also had a lot of stressors in my life. And so, I had gotten married. I became a stepmom. I had 3 UTIs in 1 year. I had graduated college. I had just gone through a lot of things. And your body interprets stress the exact same, whether it's good stress or bad stress. And so even though I had made a lot of changes and seen a lot of positive benefits from eating better in 2015, my body still had enough. And so your body sort of has like this tolerance. I think of it like a bucket. And stress is like raindrops in the bucket. And so they can all be really small and seem not very important, but that final last drop is what causes this total breakdown, this cascade. It's when the bucket spills over and you have a waterfall. And, so for women, we typically experience, when that bucket spills over, we typically experience fatigue, hormone imbalance, and digestion issues. And for me, fatigue had started several years earlier, and that was really my first sign that something was going on. But the good news is that these symptoms are all signals and your body's trying to communicate and help you understand what it needs. And they're all things that can be supported, reversed, and prevented normally through lifestyle and nutrition choices. And of course, stress relief, because what's going in that bucket is stress, and your body interprets mental, emotional, and physical stress the same. So after I got my hormones tested, I did use bioidentical hormones to get me sort of out of the pit, out of that anxiety and panic state. And there is a time, and I absolutely believe there is a time and a place for prescriptive help. And I certainly needed it at that time. But this experience really lit a spark within me, and I didn't know it at the time, but what I really wanted to understand was why it happened, how my body functioned, what was actually going on, how I could prevent it, and of course, if I met anybody, how I could, keep them from experiencing it as well. So fast forward a few months, here you see that picture in October 2015. I got involved in a really supportive group of women doing online workouts. And that was perfect for me at the time because I was able to be surrounded by positive women. I was able to focus on exercise, focus on nutrition. So a lot of just really good things. To me, the best part of that experience was the emotional support. It gave my brain something really positive to focus on when I was in the pit of what I consider the pit of despair. So that in combination with the bioidentical hormones really started making me feel better and more energized and more capable of handling life. But again, I didn't want to be on bioidentical hormones forever. I really actually wanted to know what was going on with my body. So from there, I started coaching online myself, and that motivated me to then become a personal trainer. And then from there, I continued to work on my hormones and my health. I discovered FDN, which is Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Practitioner. And so that allows me to run these lab tests on myself and on my clients. And while I was going through my FDN training, I started learning, obviously from a desire to understand my hormones. That was my primary motivation because that was the biggest thing that had ever happened to me in my life. Now, I had had rosacea, I had had weight gain, I had had digestive issues. I'd had all these other symptoms and all these other problems. But the main thing that was just absolutely devastating to me was that hormone crash. And so that was my primary motivator when I went into FDN. But what's interesting is when I started learning about how the body works and looked through these functional lab tests and started understanding what was actually happening in my body and how stress affects it, what I really learned was that hormone imbalances and hormone issues are almost always secondary. And what typically is going on in your body somewhere else that is more important is it takes your body's attention away from your hormones, because when your body is trying to protect itself, which it's very good at doing, and when your body is in some sort of stress state, the last thing it really cares about is making sure you're able to have a baby. And so it also doesn't really care if you digest your food very well. So typically for women, digestion and hormones get kind of put on the back burner when something else is going on. And that can be so many different things, from a viral infection to, you've caught a parasite, to bacterial imbalances, to yeast overgrowth, to all these different things that your body's trying to handle, and it considers more important than your fertility ability. And just a little side note there, you see I competed, which is really foolish. Within a year of crashing, I competed in a competition, which was another stressor on my body. I lost my period for 82 days, and that was not good. That did not help me heal. And now in my early 30s, as I've learned more about my body and my health, I am way happier, healthier, more energetic, better sleep, stable moods. I ovulate regularly. I get my period every single month, and I can tell when I'm ovulating, which is funny because recently when that started happening, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not sure this happened consistently for most of my 20s, which is crazy, you guys. In your 20s, you should be super fertile. You should be super healthy. You should be super happy. And for me, I've almost reverse aged, and my 30s are what my 20s really should have been. I'm obviously still working on my gut health, and I'm not really sure that that journey ever ends. But today, this is how I feel. I just feel so much better. And, that I think speaks for itself. So let's get into the nitty gritty. I know you guys are on here so that you can learn more about functional lab testing. Like I said, I am not the end all be all. I'm not the person that knows everything. But what I do know, I'm really passionate about, and it's really changed my life and my clients' lives. And, if I have a question that comes up, I'm always willing to research the answer if I don't know it already. So I do want to share, why test? I think the thing I really, there's so many certifications out there. There's so many degrees out there. There's so many things I could have done other than FDN, but I really pursued FDN because when I decided I wanted to learn more, I really wanted to get to the underlying causes. And so testing allows you to not guess, right? You're able to look in your body, see what's actually happening, and get to the root causes of things. And then you can make an informed decision as to what to do, whether it's a nutritional approach, whether you need some supplementation, whether you maybe do need to go to a doctor and get a prescription of some sort. So test, don't guess. That was a big motivator for me in terms of getting the FTN, because of the lab testing that allowed me to run on myself and my clients. So the other thing it allows you to do is get validation. A lot of times today, what we're seeing is the most visits to a doctor's office are stress related or chronic disease related, which they're connected. But what used to happen, and this is the way the medical model is created, is for acute situations. So, if you had an extreme virus, or, you got your finger cut off at work and things like that, that's what our medical model is currently created to handle. And so all these chronic illnesses and chronic diseases that are coming in, they're not as equipped to sit and to talk with the client and to discover, what's your lifestyle like, what's your history like, and really sort of uncover what's actually happening in their lives. And so a lot of people will go to their doctor like I did and get no validation. They'll be told they're crazy. They'll be told it's just part of age, that joint pain is normal, or they will be slapped a sort of basic pill, a prescription, an antidepressant, something to sort of cover the symptoms and not really get to the root cause. So validation is really, I think, one of the biggest things that you can get from some functional lab testing, whether it is a stool test or hormone test. It's going to give you so much information. I met with a client a few weeks ago, and he had tears in his eyes right as I started explaining what was found on his stool test. Literally within a few minutes of talking about some of the correlation and the symptoms of the things that we found on the stool test to how he was feeling. And his face got so red and tears in his eyes. And he said, "Kylene, I have felt like a hypochondriac for so long." He's like, "You get it, you understand." And so it's just a really, really cool thing to be able to actually dig deep and say, you are normal. What you're feeling is understandable, because this is what's happening in your body. You're able to get personalized results and protocols. Obviously, you don't get slapped one size fits all. There's no, one magic pill that fixes everything. And so when you're able to test and understand and get information, you can personalize your results and obviously get details on your individual unique body. But why, what's the difference between functional labs versus conventional testing? Like if you just walk into your doctor's office. Doctors, for some reason, don't run many of the tests. I'm not sure why. It would be more difficult, I think, to go into a doctor's office and say, "Hey, I really want a Dutch panel, a Dutch hormone test." They are used to specific testing, and they're usually a lot more limited in the scope. Functional medicine is way more interested in the big picture and in optimum health. And in the medical community, they're more concerned with, are you going to die in the next 6 months? And how can I prevent that? So if you're not presenting with, some sort of acute, I'm really in danger in some way, and I'm in one extreme or the other, they're typically not going to be as versed in that. And there's nothing wrong. I just want to clarify, I'm not anti-doctor or anything like that. I think, if I needed brain surgery, if I got in a car accident, those sorts of things, they're very good at what they are good at. But then there's this aspect to which they're not as familiar. And when you're talking about optimum health or these chronic diseases or these lifestyle factors, it's just not something that they specialize in, and that's okay. But functional ranges are more specific than conventional testing ranges as well. So when you go to a doctor and let's say you get a thyroid panel is a really common one. People will go in and ask for a thyroid panel, and their doctor will come back and say everything's still within the normal range. But if you go get a functional thyroid panel, you may find that you're a little higher, a little low in some of the hormones. The ranges are much, much more specific in functional medicine and functional lab testing, because what they are looking at is specifically the ranges that make you feel your best, where you're at your healthiest, and the optimum levels for energy, for sleep, for hormones. And again, your doctor's ranges are much more broad, and so they just want to make sure you're not going to crash or go to one extreme. And so functional lab testing often gives you more answers. So if your doctors do run the test, because sometimes it is a test that they run, sometimes it's difficult to even get them to order them. And like, so in my case, she could have run a hormone panel on me, but she was pushing back because she didn't think it was necessary. So when you hire a coach, when you hire a functional practitioner or an FTN or something like that, oftentimes you can sort of do it on demand. I'm really interested, even if you want to just, biohack yourself, you're not really struggling. Like, I test myself all the time. I just did a 23andMe test. And so there's all these different options when you're in control of the testing yourself. So you're able to get exactly what you want, what you're interested in. If your doctors do order the test, they often rule out any lifestyle, environmental, or nutritional approach and simply prescribe a medication to mask the symptoms, providing, ultimate relief in the long run. So like we said, when I went through, my personal experience, there was a lot of gut stuff going on and a lot of lifestyle things that I could have changed, but no hormone testing was recommended, no lifestyle changes, no nutritional changes. When we recently went to get work on Keegan, many of you have heard his story. If you haven't and you want specifics on that, the latest podcast episode, the Tiny Fit Diva podcast, we talk all about his testing and his results. But, he was having this constipation that was so painful, kept him from school. So I ordered him a stool test. But in the meantime, we were visiting the doctors to get him some relief and answers. And, they didn't want to change his diet. They didn't want to look into further testing. They didn't want to do any of these things. And then turns out he had C. diff, he had a parasite, he had an incredibly suppressed immune system. And there wasn't anything that they did to uncover that themselves. So again, I'm not bashing on the medical community, but sometimes when you're, looking at in certain areas, it's just their model isn't the most helpful. There is, times when you should not test, okay? So I wanted to kind of go over those because it's not for everybody. So who should not test? If you aren't ready to make a change. I really don't like to work with people unless they're ready to completely 180 their life. This is really, really important because your mentality has to be one that you will not settle for mediocrity and that you really will do anything it takes to change your life, because sometimes the things that it takes are difficult. It may mean you're obsessed with CrossFit and you need to calm down and only work out a couple times a week and shift to yoga. It might mean that you need to give up gluten, which is one of the major resistance, major things I see resistance on with my clients. It could mean that you need to prioritize your sleep, and that might be really hard for people if they're a night owl, or maybe they're used to going out with their friends late at night. Whatever it is, if you're not willing to take a hard look and say, what I'm going through right now is more difficult than the changes I need to make, we might not be ready to work together. Testing might not be for you. If you aren't open-minded, there's some weird stuff that you might be asked to do. I talk to my clients about meditation and, deep breathing, and we talk about stress relief and all these different things. You might have to take some different supplements, and some people might look at supplements as like, oh, isn't that the same as taking a prescription? It's not, because of the way your body handles it, and it's so much more gentle on your body, and it's more supportive as opposed to breaking it down. But, if it just depends on what your mental blocks are. If you aren't open-minded to trying new things, then functional lab testing might not be something for you. If you aren't committed to seeing it through, this is a lifestyle change. So anytime you work on your hormones, you work on your gut health, you work on your health in general, and if you aren't committed to actually seeing it through, then you shouldn't start. Sometimes protocols can take, gut health itself can take can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months to heal. It depends on how damaged it is, And, we talked about the biology of it in the first webinar, where you have those villi on top of your cells there floating in your GI tract, pushing the food particles through and the toxins through and absorbing the nutrients that you need. Well, just as an example, in celiac disease, those are completely blunted and damaged. So if you're at that point where you don't have those villi and they're completely blunted and broken off and damaged, and you have that sort of inflammation in your gut, to grow those back, and some people may not even be able to get 100%. Most people can reverse that, and they can heal, and your body's currently recycling cells and repairing, but it's a process. And so it depends on how long it's been damaged, how long you've been in pain, and your unique biology, your genetics, your environment, your lifestyle, everything. So if you aren't committed to seeing it through, sometimes it does take time. So again, that mentality is really, really important. If you believe that nutrition has something to do with health, I'm sorry, but you can't be a client. Functional lab testing, if you work with any functional medicine practitioner, nutrition is really going to be the foundation of their approach, or it should be, because it really is the building blocks of your health. If you think supplements are a bunch of hooey, we kind of touched on that. Some people think they're great. Some people think they're stupid. But it's probably going to be part of a protocol. If you're going through functional lab testing, you're probably going to have some supplementation. If you haven't already tried nutrition lifestyle changes, this is a big one, actually. I wanted to throw this in there because sometimes people will look at testing and they have all the money in the world and they say, I will take whatever testing you want. I will take whatever coaching you give me. I will, take whatever supplements you want me to take, all this kind of stuff. But, and you say, okay, well, what have you already tried? And, oh, well, nothing. This is my first step. Well, if you haven't already tried to change your nutrition, you haven't already tried to work on your lifestyle, you might not actually need to spend all that money on functional lab testing. There's a big group of people out there that simply changing their diet will make them feel like $1 million, and then you don't need to spend thousands of dollars, on coaching and testing and supplementation and pushing forward. So it really depends on your situation. Some people, one single step, one single change can be it. For other people, and this is typically obviously who I work with, you've tried the lifestyle changes, you've tried the nutritional changes, you keep hitting a wall, you can't figure out what's going on in your life, and so then we kind of dig a little deeper. So we just learned who it's not for. Who is it for? So if you are someone like me who is healthy and just wants to pursue optimal health, there's so many options out there. If you have unlimited funds, you can test all you want. You can just kind of learn, how your body works, and that's sort of fun. So that, that's always an option. Anyone curious about how their body works? Anyone who has seen multiple doctors to be told nothing's wrong, it's just age, your test results are normal. We talked about that earlier in terms of, validation. There's a lot of people, women in particular. Sorry, if you can see me on the video, I'm just plugging in my laptop really quickly so it doesn't die, sorry. So we talked a little bit earlier about validation, and there's a lot of people that are going into the doctor to just be told, oh, it's just part of aging, weight gain is just part of aging, hormone changes are just part of aging, joint pain is just part of aging, or you're crazy, or here's an antidepressant, or you should go on birth control. So anyone that's not satisfied with those answers, I would encourage you to dig into some testing. And by the way, we're just going to talk about 2 tests today, but there's a lot more out there depending on what your situation is. Anyone who's fatigued, stressed, and functioning less than 100%. So like I said, fatigue is often one of the first things that shows up in people. And that's really because your body only has this limited amount of energy to spend on all of its systems. And when it's focusing on something that's more important, it's going to take away from the energy that you have to function through the day. And like I said, that was one of the first things that hit me, was having to come home in the middle of the afternoon and just totally crash. If you know that something is just not right and you really want to get to the bottom of it, I would really encourage working with maybe a functional medicine practitioner or an FDN. Anyone who has incorporated nutrition and lifestyle changes but hasn't seen results, we've talked about that. Anyone with autoimmune conditions that have been diagnosed. So if you have been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, testing can be very helpful for you, because anyone that has an autoimmune condition, it's been shown that they already have leaky gut. And so leaky gut is almost like a precursor for autoimmunity. And so if you want to get to the bottom of that, here's the thing, you guys, what if you have a virus or a few parasites that's causing a lot of havoc, you have some food sensitivities, you actually get those things under control and your autoimmune condition goes into remission. I mean, how amazing would that be? If you have one autoimmune condition diagnosed, you're at a much higher risk to have more autoimmune conditions. Most people that have autoimmune conditions get diagnosed with more than one, particularly if they don't begin making the nutrition and lifestyle changes needed to get that under control and even reversed. So I did have one client, that she worked with me just in one of my online groups, not even one-on-one with testing. but it was just nutritional changes, and her autoimmune condition began to go in remission. And that was so encouraging to her, and she began to get so excited, and she slept better, and she felt more energy, and she was just amazed that her skin, her autoimmune condition showed up on her skin. She was so amazed that her skin was clearing up that she was like, all right, let's dig deeper. And so we actually started getting a little more specific. So that's just a really, really cool thing about testing too. You can really get to the bottom of it. Anyone with chronic gut issues, obviously, if you watched my last webinar, gut health is really the foundation of all of this. Anyone with consistent, irregular, or painful periods, so anyone really that has any hormone imbalance, if you're having a lot of mood swings, again, gut health can really affect the integrity of your gut lining, whether you have any pathogens present, stress, all these things can affect your hormone balance, can affect your moods, can affect your brain. So if you struggle with those things, I would highly encourage getting some testing. And again, anyone who's ready for a big change. So that mentality is super important. So let's dig in. We're just going to jump in. Again, I'm not the end all be all authority of the Dutch test, but sometimes when I get them back, sometimes I have to research different, combinations of results and things like that. But I'm just going to show you some basics because this test is so incredibly detailed. There's so much information, and it's different for every single person that comes back. So it's really, really interesting. But I did want to mention really quickly, I don't know if anybody's taking notes, but if anyone wants more information on the Dutch test and you are on Instagram, you should go follow at dr.carrie.jones, and Carrie is Carrie. So she's like the head of the Dutch test, basically. She's like the head of Precision Analytical. And but her Instagram's really awesome because she breaks it down into bites of information that are easily understood, the way she explains things. And so you can get a lot of information just on hormones, but also on how the Dutch test works from her, which is pretty cool. You can also go to their website, dutchtest.com, and there's a lot of webinars and cool information there as well. So why choose the Dutch test? There's a lot of different tests out there. There's saliva tests, which I've done for hormones before. And, there's different benefits to different tests, but I really do like the Dutch test because it does have very accurate readings. It's very, very easy for you to take. The difference between taking the Dutch test and saliva test, it's so much easier to pee on some paper than it is to get enough saliva into a tube multiple times a day. So just physically, it's a lot easier to take. What the other thing I like is how much it goes into the functioning of your hormones. So it provides free and metabolized cortisol levels, which we'll talk about later. That's how much your cortisol or how much cortisol your body is actually producing, and then how much is actually cycling through your body, and how much is being used. And so that is really great information, as opposed to just giving you a number, which is what a lot of the hormone tests do, and say, okay, your cortisol level, this is not like an accurate number, but let's just, for argument's sake, your cortisol is at an 8. It's in your body. It's not saying, that's not really telling you, well, how's your body using it? And so the Dutch test really breaks that down, which is really, really important, because if your cortisol levels were low, some people might think that means your adrenals aren't functioning properly. But what the Dutch test shows you is, your adrenals are producing enough cortisol. And so we know that it's not, adrenal fatigue necessarily, but for whatever reason, your body's not utilizing it, or it can't utilize it. And this free cortisol over here is super low. So it just having both of the numbers is really, really helpful in understanding how your body works. And again, it gives insight into the metabolism of your hormones, not just their individual levels. So it talks about, okay, you have all this estrogen and you have progesterone and testosterone, but how's it being broken down? Where is it being shuttled to in your body? Is it being shuttled out in a healthy way, or is it, potentially cancerous? So obviously that's really great information. So just the detail that the Dutch test goes into is really awesome. So again, who's it for? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Obviously, anyone with hormonal issues, PMS, PCOS, acne. But I will put a little caveat here for you, and that is that I do not like to offer the Dutch test by itself anymore. because like I said, hormone conditions are often secondary. So while it gives us a ton of information and we absolutely need it, and it can give us the big picture in conjunction with other testing, I do not like to offer this test without the GI map, just to make sure that we don't have a lot of gut inflammation, we don't have a lot of food sensitivities, we don't have a lot of pathogens going on that may actually be contributing to the hormone imbalance. So I'm going to walk you through really quickly what a Dutch test actually looks like. So this is the first page. So it's pretty awesome. This is sort of your summary page. So you can see your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Between the yellow stars is where you should be if you are premenopausal, and between the purple and the yellow star, that's postmenopausal levels. Okay, so if you remember my hormones, the first time I took it back in 2015, all my hormones were pretty much in the postmenopausal level. I pretty much didn't have them. I had no cortisol. It was crazy. So here's your daily free cortisol pattern. This is the pattern that your cortisol goes through during the day, and you want it to be highest in the morning and then taper down so that you can sleep well at night as your melatonin rises. And then here's the little summary of your total DHEA, which is another hormone, your metabolized cortisol and free cortisol. So again, the cortisol that your body is producing versus the cortisol that's actually being used in your body. It also breaks it down into numbers and ranges here. So if you don't want to look at the charts, you can always come to this page and check it out. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I just wanted to show you that it is in there. And then it shows you your progesterone levels. Now, the progesterone is averaged out by measuring the 2 progesterone metabolites that can be found in the urine. So again, this is a urine test. And it gives us, by averaging those, it gives us a good idea of your overall progesterone production. So that's how they measure that in this test. And then here's the page that gets really interesting. So you have your DHEA and testosterone here, and you can kind of see those different levels, and then how they get broken down into these different hormones here, androsterone, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that one. And then here in the fan, this is a really important marker. This is called 5-alpha reductase activity. And what's so important about this is you really want that red line to be somewhere in the middle, because if it's leaning over to the right like this, that means that your testosterone and your hormones are being shuttled down and turned into used more like sorry, what am I trying to say? The word just escaped me. Androgenic, thank you. I was going to say androgenic, that's not right. More androgenic pathway, which is common in women with PCOS. So that's basically when you're going to see deeper voices, hair on the face, weight loss resistance, more masculine hormonal tendencies. So if you have a lot of testosterone, the last thing you want it to do is be turned into shuttled down a more androgenic pathway and more accelerated, or what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, my brain is going blank right now, you guys. I'm trying to think, like it's like highlighted as a exacerbated. That's not the right word. You know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, you don't want your testosterone to be more androgenic and more masculine than it already is. And obviously you want that testosterone then to be balanced with your hormones. And I mean, there's all these different ratios that this test can give you. But so that's a really important marker there, the 5-alpha reductase activity. And there are things that we can do to assist that if that marker is like in this particular picture where it's all the way over to the right. There are different things that we can do to help that. But again, if there's some underlying inflammation and different reasons, we want to make sure that we're addressing those as well. And so normally food sensitivities, stress, inflammation, obesity, those are all things that can contribute to hormone imbalances. So over here we have estrogen, and there's 3 different types. You have estrone, estradiol, and estriol, and those are all different estrogens that you're going to have that are primary at different points in your life. But then they get broken down into these 3 different pathways, and you have 16-hydroxy, 4-hydroxy, and 2-hydroxy. And we want these to be going down the path in a certain percentage, okay? And so while it's helpful to know how much estrogen someone's making and like what the total estrogen level is, and especially especially the ratio between estrogen and progesterone, it's even more important to know how the person is actually metabolizing the estrogen, and that's what this shows us here. So if estrogen is being metabolized into good metabolites, that can protect against cancer, or it can be metabolized down a bad pathway and promote the growth of cancer. So here we have 16-hydroxy. We really, you can see over here in the percentages, the kind of range that you would expect, the healthy range. You want most of your estrogen to go down the 2-hydroxy pathway and less to be going down the 4-hydroxy and 16-hydroxy pathway. And again, we can make changes to work on how the body is detoxifying estrogen and minimize the risk of cancer. But that's one of the reasons we want to pay close attention to this. And we really, 4-hydroxy is considered the worst metabolite because if you see down here, if it's not detoxified, if the things going down this pathway aren't properly broken down, it can lead to DNA damage. And this is considered a carcinogenic pathway. So that's the worst one. We want to make sure that most of it's being shuttled into the 2-hydroxy, the least is shuttled into 4-hydroxy, and some is shuttled into 6-hydroxy. There's some benefits to 16, but there's also some cons there as well. So this is phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification. So this process right here is phase 1. And this process over here, methylation, is one of the phase 2 processes of liver detoxification. And there's some others called glucuronidation and sulfation, but this is the methylation pathway. And this allows the estrogen to bind with other factors and essentially get eliminated from your body. So let's say everything's healthy, everything's going down the right percentages of the different pathways. It's primarily going down the 2-hydroxy pathway, and you have a good amount of estrogen being produced. Well, you want to make sure that you can eliminate that estrogen. And so if you have low methylation here, you might actually be recirculating your estrogen, which can be, can lead to estrogen dominance. You want to make sure that if you have a good number and it's being processed down the right pathways, also that you're able to effectively eliminate it out of your body. Just like food, everything has sort of its life cycle. It needs to be produced in your body. It needs to be used in your body. It needs to get out of your body. But there's different reasons that phase 1 can be affected, and this can be genetic mutation. So someone can have a gene that's been activated that can affect the pathways here. Obviously, nutrition, chemicals. So we're exposed to a lot of xenoestrogens and chemicals and toxins in our life now, and so that's all things that can affect this phase. Nutrient deficiencies, inflammation, and things like that. So after they go through phase 1, obviously they go through phase 2, and we want them to get out of the body. So methylation is highly dependent on a number of nutrient cofactors. Like I said, this is the part where they sort of get bound up with other nutrients and get excreted from the body. And so a lot of the cofactors that help this happen that you need in order to make this detoxification part happen is vitamin B2, vitamin B3, B6, B12, so all the B vitamins basically, but also choline, glutathione, vitamin C, copper, magnesium, selenium, and zinc. And just sort of an interesting note there, selenium, magnesium, and zinc are often deficiencies that you find in people with autoimmunity. So there's sort of a nice little correlation there. So detoxification, nutrient density, always very, very important when you're looking at gut health and hormone balance. Again, this is just another page. It basically breaks down your cortisone and some different metabolites and things like that. And you can look at the numbers if you'd rather look at those. And then we have cortisol. So this is another really interesting page. Again, we have the amount that your adrenals are actually producing, and then we have the amount that your body is actually utilizing. And then we have this little chart here that shows if your body is favoring cortisol or the inactive form of that, which is cortisone. So a strong preference for cortisol, which is what we see in this particular example, usually means something like the body is trying to help give the person energy or fight, a big inflammation or infection. It's a good bet here that if you're seeing a high preference for cortisol in this fan chart, that the person whose test result this is highly inflamed and would probably need to go on an anti-inflammatory diet. And again, we'd want to dig deep into what's causing that. And so I'd recommend a GI map to make sure that there's not a lot of pathogens running rampant, and there's nothing that, we can address further. Now, if it was flipped to the other side and it was preferring cortisone, that's when your body's really trying to signal that you need to slow down and de-stress and stop. And so your body can deactivate cortisol into cortisone to protect itself from the negative effects of high cortisol. So one of the things women really hate is cortisol can help you store belly fat. And so when we're highly stressed over long periods of time, it makes it very difficult for us to lose weight. But if it's preferring a lot of cortisone, it's a good indicator that there's been long-term stress, maybe some high emotional stress. And so stress management is going to be really, really crucial there. Oh, I didn't include the other picture. So one of the things, if you can see here, so we have free cortisol down here. Actually, let me go back and see if there's a better. Yeah, let's look at these here. So we have metabolized cortisol versus free cortisol. And so the balance between these two is really interesting as well, because if you are producing enough cortisol, your body should really be utilizing that, right? But we don't always see the arrows pointing in the same direction. And so if you see that you have low metabolized cortisol, like if this arrow was pointing over here and it was really low, and you have high free cortisol, so there's a lot, your body isn't producing much, but it's saving it and circulating it, and not clearing it out of your system, that can indicate something like hypothyroidism, low thyroid function, poor liver function, brain communication problems, all sorts of stuff. So that's actually that particular balance between the two is a really interesting thing to note. So if you ever get a test back and you see that your body's not producing a lot of cortisol, but it's recirculating it and not excreting what it does have, that can indicate some really interesting things, including hypothyroidism. And then here at the end of the test, you see it gives you some new, this is relatively new on the test, it gives you some organic acids and some metabolites. And so these are some interesting markers to sort of see, here's like a vitamin B12 marker. So we can kind of get again, it just gives us a bigger picture of what's going on in your body. So it's a really, really, really inclusive test. And like I said, when I get it back from my clients, I'm still at the point where, sometimes I have to do some research and kind of be like, okay, what's this combination of things mean? What's this combination of things mean? But really, when you boil it down, typically if your hormones are imbalanced, it's because of stress, inflammation, and things like that. And so, and toxicity. And so those are all things that we can control through diet and lifestyle and environment. So let's talk about the GI map. This is probably my ultimate favorite, and I don't really like to run other tests without also running this one because it gives you so much information. It's very, very comprehensive. The nice thing about this test, I used to run another hormone test, and it was a 3-day collection. The nice thing about the GI map is it's a 1-day collection, so you only have to collect your poo one time, which is so much nicer than 3. It screens for parasites, bacteria, yeast, fungi, viruses. But what's nice about this one is it also gives immune markers. Like I said, we were able to identify that my son had a really suppressed immune system, which is a really important consideration because that affects obviously the protocol and the way you approach the situation. It shows inflammation, specifically in the colon. It gives you a colon inflammation marker, and it gets to the root cause of many, many, many health complaints. So who is the GI map for? Honestly, anyone that really comes to me and has already tried nutrition, hasn't seen results, I'm going to recommend the GI map. So anyone that has digestive issues, is struggling with fatigue, nausea, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, abdominal pain, brain fog, anxiety, depression, mood swings, neurological concerns, hormone balances. And what's nice about this is it can be run on almost any age. If you can collect your poop, you can run this test. And what's really interesting is, everybody's going to respond to things differently. So, for example, one person might, two people, let's say, show up with H. pylori. One person experiences all the negative symptoms of H. pylori, and someone maybe doesn't, but you still want to address it. Other people, for example, I had a client that had pretty much everything in the kitchen sink. They had worms, they had parasites, they had candida, they had bacterial inbound. I mean, they literally check it off. They had H. pylori as well. Check it off the list. They had it. And, that provides so much validation for why you feel nauseous, why you feel sick, why you can't use the restroom properly, why you're not absorbing the nutrients from your food, why you can't gain or lose weight, whatever it is that you're struggling for. Is this a really amazing test to kind of get to the bottom of it. So I'm just going to walk you through it really quickly. So it's going to show you pathogens. These are, just different pathogens that are common, so that it screens for. So C. diff here, toxin A and toxin B. So if you had both, that would be a pretty virulent C. diff, and you might be really experiencing the side effects of that. E. coli, I just like to point that one out because that's the 0157. That's actually a food poisoning version of E. coli. And typically it's very self-limiting. So if you are not currently experiencing diarrhea when you get this back, it may have already gone away. So that's kind of an interesting marker. Parasitic pathogens, a few specific parasites here. Giardia is actually the one that my son had. Viral pathogens here, H. pylori, and it's going to go through all of these different markers here. So if you have H. pylori show up at all, you definitely want to address that, just because most people, there's about 50% of the population that has H. pylori and they don't know it. And the reason you want to address H. pylori is because the longer you have it, the more likely you are to have symptoms. And the longer you have it, the more prone you are to getting ulcers and potentially stomach cancer. So it is something that you definitely want to get in check. And again, you're probably always going to have a little bit of something, it's not that you always want to have this 100% good, quote unquote, good bacteria in your gut. You need the quote unquote bad bacteria too, but it needs to be in a certain balance and a certain homeostasis. And so you want to get the opportunistic ones, the things that can cause problems, down to a certain point. You want to get the good ones up to a certain point where they can keep each other in check. And that's really, really where you want to go. So when they're showing up on the test, that means they're overgrown. It's too much. You don't want to see them on the test. We have some normal flora here, and it just sort of shows you the ranges. This right here is an interesting part of the test, the phylomicrobiota. There's two main families of bacteria, the Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes. And really the important thing here is the ratio between the two. And so this is gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria. And so if you see this marker, interestingly enough, mine was above 1. And what's funny about that is if you see this ratio above 1, that's typically associated with obesity. So it's kind of an interesting, when I got mine done, because you don't want to review your own test results. I was on the phone with my mentor and I was like going through all this with him. And I had like 2 or 3 things. And he's like, I've never seen this before. That's really interesting. I was like, well, that would be me. I am interesting and complicated. So that's kind of an interesting marker. So then here you have opportunistic bacteria. Opportunistic bacteria, again, these are the bacteria that when the good bacteria is lessened or not functioning properly and not in the right balance, these are the bacteria that are going to grow. They're going to take over. So here in this particular case, if this was a real client, we have a lot of opportunistic bacteria and dysbiosis here. So there's a lot of imbalance going on in the gut. Potential autoimmune triggers. Now, something I want to clarify here is that if you have this, one of these bacteria show up on the test, it does not mean that you have an autoimmune condition. It just means that these have been associated with people that have autoimmune conditions. So again, leaky gut and gut issues are usually a precursor for autoimmunity, and this would be considered like a trigger and environmental part. There's many, many things that have to happen together at the same time in order for you to actually get diagnosed with an autoimmunity. But all those little parts are factors, and here are some bacteria that have been associated with that. And so obviously you would want to take that factor away and make sure that's in check. Fungi and yeast overgrowth. So women particularly tend to have, yeast problems and more of a struggle, although men can absolutely get the overgrowth. And these little buggers are things that really, really like to feed on sugar and alcohol. And so this is the part of the test where you're going to see if you have candida, if you have some different yeast overgrowth. And the other interesting thing about your gut bugs here is that they all sort of like to feed on each other. So where one is present, typically others are present. So yeast really like to feed on bacteria, really like to feed on parasites. They all sort of create this perfect environment in your gut for the other to thrive and to live. So another thing to really think about is when you get your GI map and you go through it and you find maybe that you have a few things going on, don't be surprised if your next test isn't 100% clear, because sometimes stirring it up uncovers some of the other bugs that have been sort of thriving and living off of each other. And so that's kind of common too. Here we have some viruses. Epstein-Barr is a really, really important one of note that this stool test screens for. And then of course we have the fun stuff. We have parasites. This fake sample here has no parasites, yay. Also screens for worms. So if you travel a lot, if you are someone that goes even across states, but especially if you travel out of the country, this is a really great test. I would say maybe even annually or anytime you travel out of the country, just to make sure, you didn't pick up some worms. Because if you can nip that stuff in the bud before you get really sick and before it really starts affecting you, that is the best thing to do. And then here we have some really fun markers. So I'm going to talk about these really quickly. Elastase is a pancreatic enzyme marker. So is your pancreas inflamed, or is it creating enough enzymes for you to help you break down your food? Steatocrit is a fat marker, marker in how your body is able to break down the fat that you eat. Beta-glucuronidase is a route of detoxification for the body. So if it's like really, really high, you may not be detoxifying your hormones. So like this person's is really high, so they may have some detoxification issues. Fecal blood, there's no blood in your stool. Secretory IgA, this is an immune system marker. So if you'll see here, this is 500 to 2000 is sort of the normal range, the healthy range. Anything below 500 is considered a suppressed immune system. Keegan's, and I'll show you this in a minute, Keegan's was at a 2. So obviously, duh, he was getting sick. But we have the physical barrier. We talked about this in the last webinar. We have that physical barrier, and the secretory IgA is really the chemical barrier that is part of your immune system that helps protect you against these toxins. Anti-gliadin, this is your gluten gliadin antibody, which is basically your response to gluten. So if you're gluten-free, that obviously should be very low. And that's an interesting marker there. And then here's the inflammatory marker, calprotectin. And so this is the marker in your colon for colon inflammation. And so if this is really, really high, I believe if the marker is over 150, they use it to diagnose IBD versus IBS. And so that's sort of an interesting marker to watch on your test. And then we have zonulin. Now, this is another really great marker. This person's zonulin is really high, not as high as mine was. Mine was really, again, it was shockingly high, but I had 3 parasites, and 2 of them were intracellular parasites, which means they like go in and out of your cells, which this was a fun little explanation that my mentor gave me. He was basically like, think of those parasites as like lawnmowers in your gut. And I was like, oh, that's great. That's really exciting. But zonulin is a marker that actually opens up the tight junctions in your epithelial cell wall. And so often you find zonulin is high in leaky gut because if someone is eating like a lot of gluten, for example, it raises their zonulin levels and causes leaky gut. And so that's one of the reasons we want to avoid gluten. Well, in my case, I'm gluten-free 100% of the time. We think that the zonulin can also be used as a protective measure, so to kind of flush things out. And because I had so many issues with the parasites and the crazy parasites, that my zonulin being so high could have been my body trying to actually handle that situation. So kind of an interesting marker there, but when it's really, really high, basically that indicates leaky gut. So that is the basics of the GI map, which I think is pretty cool. I got really nerdy on you there for a second. But I wanted to share really quickly some personal results, because it is pretty amazing what you can do through some basic supplementation, some herbal remedies, and some lifestyle changes. So we eliminated C. diff without antibiotics. So I just put this here from the Mayo Clinic. Antibiotics or surgery, those are your first steps in treating C. difficile, according to Mayo Clinic. We were able to completely eliminate. Here are his test results from November 2017 and from May of 2018. See, it's positive there, it's negative there. So with some nutritional and lifestyle changes and through a natural herbal supplementation, we were able to rebalance things and completely eliminate that. And if any of you guys know, C. difficile is very, very antibiotic resistant. It's potentially very dangerous, and it's very, very contagious. And so that's something, if you do have, you don't really want to be sharing utensils. You don't want to be sharing glasses. You don't want to be, spreading that around. And so we got really serious really fast on that one. Restored immune system function. I mentioned this to you. I wanted to show you the actual clips here of his test results. So secretory IgA, his was at a 2 in November. It was at a 975 in May. So we still want to get that a little bit higher, and there's some things we're still working on for him, but there you have it. So that is pretty exciting. And you could physically see the difference too. He's not getting sick anymore, so that was a big thing. Eliminated H. pylori without harsh treatments, the antibiotics. So I want to put this from WebMD. H. pylori, you're going to have antibiotics, drugs that reduce the amount of acid in your stomach, which, by the way, can produce other problems for you later on. And so those are things that really, if you can, you want to avoid as much as possible. And so it did take me personally, this is my personal results, it did take me personally 2 rounds to completely eliminate the H. pylori, but I did, and I didn't have to take a single antibiotic or acid inhibitory drug. So the things I really want you guys to take away is, obviously gut health is important. It really does affect every aspect of your life. Your gut health can affect your brain. It can affect your hormones, your mood, obviously your digestion. If you aren't going to the bathroom regularly, that's kind of important. Food sensitivities, your enjoyment of life, it can affect, whether you feel energized or whether you feel depressed or anxious. And so I really, really think that gut health is the foundation, which is why that's become my ultimate priority, is helping people heal their guts. Most disease, inflammation, and immune problems start in the gut. Like you just said, hormones are important, but nutrition is the foundation. So hormones are typically secondary. And like I said, the Dutch test gives you so much information on how your body's working. And it does give us action steps to take. So I'm not saying don't take the test. I'm just saying don't ever take it alone, because we're also going to work on lifestyle. And we want to check for other inflammatory things in the GI map. And the last thing I want to talk about is that, you do have control over your health. And sometimes it is a little bit of an investment. Sometimes it does take time. So it can be an investment of your time. It could be an investment of your money. And it does take some effort, but it is completely worth it, because if you can get control of your gut and control of your health and learn the steps that it takes in order to maintain that, you're going to have a very long, healthy, and happy life. So right before I'm going to pop off of this shared screen here, but before we do that, I want to talk really briefly about Hormone Hacker. It's my new program that launches September 1st. So it's 10 weeks long. It is a nutrition and lifestyle approach. So anyone that has gut issues or hormone issues, that's what we're going to focus on healing over this 10 weeks. So we're going to heal your gut, balance your hormones, and live full out, because you can't do that when you have crazy hormones and a crappy gut. You're going to have support from an online community, including myself and other women going through this process. I already have some really awesome women signed up, and I can't wait to just fill up the group with other supportive women. You're going to get accountability and schedule coaching sessions. So we have dates that are already set that I'm going to give you at the beginning of the course, where I will get on live. And that's going to include things like homework for the next week, covering the topics and the information that we're going to learn, allowing you to ask questions, and keeping you accountable to check in and stay on track. It does also include 4 weeks of recipes and meal plans. Now, I didn't include 10 because the point is to train you and educate you, but then I want you to create a lifestyle that you can actually maintain and begin learning how to listen to your body and create your own meals. So the first few weeks, we're going to talk about different foods that are beneficial for hormones and gut health, and what to remove and what can help heal. But also the weeks 7, 8, and 9, we're going to be talking about lifestyle a lot. So stress relief and meditation and all of the things that go into balancing your life and being able to maintain a healthy life. I'm actually probably going to have a guest speaker one of those weeks as well, and she really focuses on energy and stress relief and those sorts of things. So I'm really, really excited to bring her to you as part of this program. So before we leave and before I open it up for questions, I just wanted to remind you guys of a few things. So for anyone who signs up with a friend, so you can go to www.thetinyfitdiva.com/hormonehacker. And if you have a friend sign up as well, just email me what their name was, and when they sign up, you will get a $25 referral. Thank you. And for anyone that signs up for Hormone Hacker, period, you do have the option to upgrade with some of this testing. So if you wanted to get the Dutch test and the GI map to really personalize the 10 weeks, you absolutely can. And anyone that does that and is part of Hormone Hacker gets $100 off their results and coaching session for being a member. So it's less than $20 a week. The Hormone Hacker is $197 for 10 weeks. So it's less than $20 a week. And if you get a friend to join you, you'll get $25 off as well. So let me go ahead and pop off here if I can. Guys, I'm having so much trouble here. Oh, stop share. That's all I needed to do, stop share. Yay. And there we go. I'm back. Woohoo! Okay, so for anyone that invited friends, please just message me and let me know, because if you had 2 or more friends, you're going to be entered to win a fun gift from me. If you happen to invite more than that, let me know. But yeah, I would absolutely love for you guys to sign up. I'm really excited to launch this program. It's already on, it's already launched, it's already set up, and you guys can just go to the website and check it out. What else was I going to say? Oh, yes. I have a big bonus for anybody that signs up by tonight. I can't believe I almost forgot this. So anybody that signs up by tonight, again, thetinyfitdiva.com/hormonehacker, has your choice of one of these books. So if you want to sign up tonight, you're going to get Cooking for Hormone Balance. So you can use this as a supplement to the 10 weeks. So you have lots and lots of recipes and information to help support you on your 10-week journey. Or you can choose, if you have maybe some skin issues and want to learn more about that, Clean Skin from Within. So if you sign up by tonight, again, it's $197. If you sign up by the end of the day, you get your choice. I'm going to send you one of those books and you can choose which one. So thanks for joining me, guys. Does anybody have any questions? I don't see anything in the chat box. Any questions before we log off? This is kind of a different one. Last time it was so into gut health and hormones, and this one was so much into testing. I don't know if anybody has any questions about anything we talked about. Okay, well, thank you for joining me, you guys. If you think of any questions later, please feel free to let me know. I will post this webinar on the page, and I'm so glad that you were here today keeping me company. Hope you have an awesome Saturday, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.